What's going on, everybody? Hope you're doing well. My name is Lamont. Been a full-time trader for 7 years now, part of the Chart Guys team for half that, more than half of that, where I head up our futures room and our swing report. In this video, we'll go over some hype stocks, GME, the overall market, and some other hype sectors. Hit you with some trade zones, update you with the some old information, and that's really it. So let's get into it, shall we? All right, so we'll start off with GME, I guess, because that's what's hot on the streets right now. That's what everybody is talking about. All right, so the way that I'm looking at GME, especially because these are weekly videos, so again, I'm not going to see you throughout the week. I would prefer to keep things bigger picture. So the way that I'm viewing it right now is pretty much all of this price action since that major high was made back in 2021 has been dictated by it's you can't see it right now. It's the hourly structure here. This guy, right? So this little bit of balance sitting at the all-time high. I'm not sure where the actual profile went, but there we go. It should match up fine. All right, so this guy over here, sitting at all-time high, clearly made this high over here, right? Inability to find acceptance over the point of control, and then they move lower. This structure is also important. We'll come back to that in a moment, though. But I just want to show this as well. There's a battle for the value area low over here. A very, very clean value area low hold. A move, a pop and drop again at the point of control. Move back down to the value area low. The value area low of the that little hourly structure sitting at all-time high becomes problematic again. And then you'll see that these local highs, or rather these other two highs also, failures at the value area low. And then if we come back all the way back around, remember it's this guy over here, even this local high was pretty much an open above that value area low that failed, and then we move back down into this lower structure. This lower structure is this big guy. So this massive EQ over here made for this failure, right? Inability to get over the point of control, inability to get over the point of control, value area low starts being problematic for these buyers, and then you come into this recent pump and you fall back down under this structure, you hold the local demand zone, and then you pop back into this guy, and again, it's this POC that's being problematic. So the way that I see it is we're just looking at one big old EQ. I think that's kind of how Dan's looking at it as well, but I think he may be looking at it just this baby EQ. So this is potentially a daily lower high being set here at 33.70. If the sellers can break 27.41 on Monday, then that'll be a confirmed daily lower high. And if they can break 22.79 after that, then that'll be a daily lower high and a lower low. We'll see further weekly retracement. There's a lot of space for a potential weekly higher low to be set over 17.70. But honestly, I'm not really too interested in the potential weekly higher low. And I know Kitty's position is like in 21 or something like that. But personally, I would rather have it down here, right? Because I've got this guy marked up as well. And so this structure over here, this should be a yellow dash line. So this structure over here, right, is pretty much sitting on top of a whole bunch of balance, right? If I zoom out to the weekly, it's this guy, right? This guy is sitting on top of all of this, okay? The low of the structure over here is at 1020, right? And so I'm thinking, well, it's a fact, right? As long as you don't find acceptance under this structure, then you don't come down and do more of this kind of balance, right? So I would much rather look for another play down here. We've already seen a ton of price action bounce around over that key structure and under this guy. So I don't really see any reason why we couldn't continue to do that. So personally, I would be interested in this name if we start to drill a little bit, get that daily lower high set, break to a lower low even, and then come down into this area. And this is probably not a situation where I would look to, just like scale blindly with equal scales. I would like to see I would like to see extension in all of these RSIs here, at least up to the daily. If you zoom out, if you throw on your RSI, you'll see that the daily actually doesn't really spend that much time being too extended. So I would like to see the daily get oversold into this zone, and then I would be pretty interested in a swing. Now I'm going to set up this trade zone, but obviously it's going to be large risk because it's a rather volatile name, so to speak. But the R multiple is going to be very appropriate, right? So something like this is very, very appropriate for GME. A little bit bigger picture. Obviously, I only see you guys once a week, so I'm open to day trading it as well. But you know, again, for the nature of these videos, swing trading, weekly setups, whatever, I like it down here. All right, so that's pretty much it. That's what I'm looking for GME, and I think the daily would be oversold if they made it their way down there. Oh, it's I don't know why it's like broken. The RSI indicator is like broken. I don't know. I guess because it's so volatile, but hold on a second here. It's broken. Something is wrong with that with that calculation. Anyway, so that is pretty much it. Let's see about the weekly. It's not even close to being extended. Anyway, that's what I'm looking at for GME. All right, so let's move on to the overall market here. Start off with SPY, of course. So SPY hit our target. This trade zone was given back in May 18th. So if you want to reverse engineer the thought process, you can just go back into that video. But, you know, to summarize it, it's really just a backtest of this area that's sitting at the prior all-time high, right? As long as these buyers were defending backtest of this guy, well, then obviously we don't come back into here. If we don't come back into here, then obviously higher prices relative to this all-time high structure are being accepted, right? That's pretty much it. So now we have a very decent rally here, right? The sellers had an opportunity, really 3 sessions, to fill the gap, and they could not. So as long as this gap remains unfilled down to 537.01, that's going to keep these buyers the most confident. We have, how did that happen? We have a lot of space for a potential daily higher low to be set over 532.05. Anything over that will be good for 1. We do have to kind of be mindful of like the potential of an island reversal, right? If for whatever reason we continue to trade sideways, don't fill this gap, and then gap down, that's a notable pattern as well. But even if that occurs, again, as long as the local demand zone is supportive, right, then these buyers have nothing to worry about. So that is pretty much it, right? So for a bit of a trade zone, again, this one has already hit target. So I guess if you want an add or a reload or whatever, that's kind of the situation that you would find yourself in. Then let's see, if you use this trade zone, I mean, then you should be looking at it something like this, I would say, right? And for projections, for targeting, let's go to the weekly time frame and peep the original target was for the R2, so it's a very lofty target. Let's see what the monthly looks like. Let's just set this up for like, that's fine. The R2 for the month, I think, is a pretty reasonable target. So let me clear this back out, clean this chart up again. And remember, this is the May 18th, if you want to go back and check it out. I think I posted it to the Twitter as well. So if you want to just pop into Twitter, that would work. I think this is honestly fine. Like this kind of a trade zone just like this, come in at this POC, come in at this POC at the prior all-time high. Something like this. Pretty good R for that as well, right? It's like 3.5 R to try to get to that monthly R2. I like this. This is a very reasonable play. It's probably also essentially a play for a potential weekly higher low, with anything over 518.36 going to be good for 1. Okay, so that's pretty much it for SPY. Moving on to the Qs. So the Qs also came into our trade zone, hit the target. Obviously, it only dipped its toes into the trade zone, so only got 1 fill if you're trading these zones to a key without any kind of adjustment, which that's fine if you want to do that. But still, credit where credit's due, right? It did get into our trade zone, and then it did get to our target. So now at this point, it's the same. It's a very similar setup, right? You just want to make sure that this demand zone holds if these buyers are going to remain confident. And, I'm open to the potential that we just continue to balance over this guy and not necessarily over this, because this is a significant amount of daily balance relative to like these 4 days over here. I would not be surprised if the market does something like that, right? Which would still be very healthy. As long as they don't find acceptance under this guy, balance like this over this structure, totally fine. Okay, so lots of space for a daily higher low to be set. Anything over 461.53 will be good for 1. And it's a similar situation as well. I should have mentioned this earlier. The gap, as long as the gap remains unfilled down to 468.14, well then buyers have nothing to really worry about. Okay, so that's pretty much it. If you want a updated trade zone, then it would be something like this. Let me hide this guy away. All right, so something like this, I think it's pretty reasonable. Hold on, let me move this over a bit. Yeah, something like that. I think it's pretty reasonable. I understand the targeting is just to come back to the high, but we're looking for a pullback play here. So, and I think for the extended targets, let's check it out. You know, we should be trying to get for that, go for that R2. That's at 513.51. So we'll bring that back. You know, we'll look for an exit under it, slightly under it. I like this, you know, it's a very reasonable setup. The R multiple is good. It's 6.48 to 1. I like this trade setup. It makes a lot of sense in my opinion. There's a lot of demand built up over here as well. So considering how good R this is, I don't even hate bringing it all the way down to something like that. I think at that point the R will suffer a little bit, but let's take a look and see what that looks like. That's still very reasonable. I like this. You know, this is a swing trade kind of a setup, right? So this is potentially for a weekly higher low. It's actually for a potential weekly lower low with no follow through as well. Basically, it's for looking for another backtest of this area of demand. As long as this area of demand is constructive, I guess you could say it's for a potential monthly higher low. The price action trend to me means a little bit less. For me, I care much more about whether or not this area that has now turned into a demand zone will continue to be a demand zone. Where's my charts? It's weird. Something is going on. Oh, it's probably on a different chart. All right, so for example, that low over here, this recent low for the, what is it, monthly higher low, weekly higher low? Both. This guy was made right off of the value area high of this structure. So as long as this big structure, bigger picture, also doing okay. So just like I was saying that the market would be fine if we were doing something like this on the daily time frame because it would be holding local daily demand. If it were to be doing something like this, that would still be okay because then you'd be holding this weekly demand zone. We spent a lot of time here, right, on the weekly time frame going sideways. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the Qs. I think this is a very reasonable trade zone. Moving on to the Dow here. So the Dow, you know, I'm not so interested in trading the Dow here. I would still just stick with this trade zone that was shared last week, I think. Bigger picture, it does seem to be like we're just balancing, right? So you have this key supply that is in the way, preventing buyers from breaking to new all-time highs. And then you have this key demand zone over here where obviously made for this major low over here. I would not be surprised if we were to just lower high here and then lower low and still come down and test this area. All right, because this is a pretty weak weekly bounce right now. Potentially setting a weekly lower high at 391.91, and they just got to break 383.63 next week to confirm that weekly lower high. And then if they can break under 380.41, that'll be a weekly lower high and a lower low. So I still maintain that this is a reasonable trade zone, and I would, you know, I would make adjustments to this if you continue to kind of trade sideways before entering it. We want to make sure that the daily RSI at the bare minimum is extended. I think it still would be if they were to come down right from here. But if they were to trade sideways a bit more before coming down here, then, you know, you want to move it a little bit lower. For now, I'm going to leave it just as is because it's just about right for now. That is pretty much it. Okay, so the IWM, what did we say last week? It should be down here. I think we were being conservative, saying, okay, we can just recycle this play. If you recall, we gave you this play and this play. We gave you this play somewhere in here, which worked out fine over here. I think it was during here, so it only shook out over here. We gave you this play like right before it set up. We gave you this play as well. And so I'm thinking, you know, why did these plays work? It's because these plays were set up off of this guy and this guy, right? And these two are what created this structure here. And this kind of price action is what we're dealing with right now, as long as we're staying within, under that upper structure, the supply zone, and that lower structure, the demand zone. So I think, you know, continue to stick with this. Let's continue to stick with this guy over here. Makes a lot of sense. That being said, you know, I did make a play for it off of here because we did have extension into this major point of control, and actually there was another POC here. I must have done it on a different chart, probably my indices chart. Yeah, so on this session on Tuesday, you know what, I can just bring it up here because I know that I dropped it into a thread. describing it to one of our members, and if you are interested in learning this methodology with a huge group of traders, then consider consider joining our community. It is quite robust, and we are always very happy to answer questions. Where was that thing? Let's see. So we had a member here ask about pass back overplays, and that's like my favorite play. You hear me talk about it all the time on these videos, and so I just included this example in here. They're timestamped, but I guess once you get after a certain time, the timestamps get wiped. I think you can still verify it by copying it, but I don't want to waste that time. Anyway, the first attempt is all done live, right? So this, whatever, you can join the community and ask folks. I do these trades all the time, live trades all the time. Anyway, so and before before the day even starts, this isn't a pre-market. I'm saying the only daily level around is that daily POC and RTY, and I'm open to a play if the RSI is extended into it. And I was talking about these two guys, this one and this one, but I needed the RSIs to be extended into it. So I was playing off of this guy because at this point when we were here, the RSI wasn't really extended yet. So this setup was the first one was a chop and stop. So if I'm saying I was eyeing the stair step, and if I was triggered into it, I would just these are all just descriptions of where I would chop it up. I get it chopped it up, and then I stop that attempt out because we broke to a new low. And then later in the session, I say uno mas, one more time, RTY, looking for an exit under the Depop, blah blah blah. I'll just walk you through it. Like just know that it is all called out and stuff. If you guys want to again reverse engineer, follow along, whatever. It was just on here on this session. So it was the Tuesday session, and it should be marked up, I think, still. Let's see. It was here on this Tuesday session. So on this Tuesday session, the first attempt was, I think, this one. The first attempt was this stair step break like this, right? So we're on the daily time frame. Remember, we're testing that daily level over here. So I'm thinking, all right, let me try for that stair step break. Pretty straightforward setup. Where'd it go? Oh, you know what? I'll just do it on this chart because then it's already marked up. So let's see, Tuesday. So here we are. We're at that potentially at that daily. Oh wait, this is not right. This is should be on this lower level here. So let me just zoom into this one. It's fine. We can see it from there. Tuesday. Okay. So here we are, and we're testing that daily level. It's a very simple, straightforward stair step setup. I just bought the stair step break as such. Throw your stop under this low. Chop it up in here because this is local supply, right? If these buyers can't get over this local supply, well then obviously then they're not going to advance. So I just got my risk out of the equation. It was pretty much just like this. Stopped out of it over here and then did the same exact play over here, right? Same exact play. Now we're actually testing that level and things were a bit more extended. And then this was a banger, right? This one, I got two partial exits on this day. And then at the end of the day, I rolled the proceeds into IWM just because I want to build a position of shares, like free shares. I want to day trade to get some free shares to try to hold for the rally to potentially broaden. So I'm just going to hold those shares. And obviously it gapped up the next day. So it would have been better to hold the futures contract. But, once you have a game plan, you just stick with it, right? For better or worse, you stick with it. Because if you go off the cuff, you can't really control for that, right? Like you're not going to know, where you went wrong or whatever. So once you have the plan, stick to it. And that was pretty much it. So again, if you're interested in learning this methodology, join us in the chat group. It's the where I hang out is usually the chaos thread where there's far fewer moderators. I think it's a little bit more fun. But anyway, that's pretty much it. So for IWM, I'm still sticking with this because it's just about balancing under this guy and over this guy. So that's it. I think if you get daily extension into this lower level, we can do this same exact setup, same exact trade that worked last time. And again, if you were following these trades along, if you just traded all these trades, as we set it up beforehand, you have a lot of cushion to work with here, All right, so moving on to the dollar. So the dollar is seeing some strength here. It did move down to the lows of this local demand zone, but could not see acceptance back under it. So remember, we're watching these two key structures for the dollar, this guy and this guy. And it's these two structures, this one and this one, has contained price action throughout, ever since 2022. And so if these sellers are not going to be able to make their way down through this area of demand and this area of demand, and then return the favor in kind, basically the buyers responded by holding this lower structure, right? Their last response from the buyers from here sent us all the way to the upper structure, right? And so if these sellers are not going to be able to bring us back down to this lower structure again, what does that tell you about the sellers, right? That they're not so strong. And so how are we going to assess whether or not they're advancing down there? All right, well, we'll just look at these demand zones that have yet to be traded through. And as of right now, they're holding this one. So if they can hold this demand zone and crack back over this supply zone and find acceptance over 106.335, that would be some pretty notable strength. It would be, the last time they had even, any acceptance at all over that point of control was back here in 2023. So eyes on that. Ideally, if you took this trade zone, ideally you took some profits. And so if you stop out here, it'd be a chop and a stop, because there was plenty of time to take profits, right? Like even if you came out at the lows of the local range, right? Like this low here, because this trade zone was set up here, that's still a 2.35 R trade. So that's pretty much it. If you are still holding runners for this, you're looking for a here next, and then here, assuming you don't get stopped out. Okay, so I'm not too interested in updating this trade zone. If anything, would be looking for fades up here, but things aren't too extended right now, so I'm not going to set that up. I would just let this ride out, this trade, if you're in it still. I would just let it ride out, and then we'll see what the market has next week for dollar traders, although nobody has ever asked me about the dollar, so I don't think there's too many of you guys out there. All right, so moving on to the VIX here. There's really very little change in the VIX. Like I would imagine there's probably some volatility coming sooner rather than later. Let's check the fear and greed index. It's not even close to being greedy, actually. Okay, so wait, S&P. That's interesting. Okay. What's this timeline? Oh, I see. Yeah, it's honestly not looking so bad. So we'll see. I mean, the VIX can just continue to hang out down here at these low levels, and I continue to maintain that if you don't find acceptance over 15.44, then there's no real change in the volatility that we've seen since October. So the October low. So that's it. Just keep eyes on 1544, in my opinion. Moving on to NVDA here. So for NVDA, all my drawings got a little jacked up because of the split, so they're all hanging out up there. So we just have to reconstruct everything. It did not come into our trade zone last week because that was shared last week, because we were looking for a momentum style play, back testing this, and I expressed caution for it, and yet it just continues to rip. So you never know, right? The markets can always be irrational for a long, not that I'm saying this is necessarily irrational, but the old saying goes, markets can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent. So there's, again, more space for a daily higher low. Anything over 117.01 will be good for that daily higher low. And, if you get hourly extension into this zone, you probably at least get a bit of a bounce. So let's check the longer term pivots right now. I guess they're trying for that R5, right? Man, they're already like halfway there. This is wild. All right, so let's do it like this. Let's just play for the R2 for the month, as opposed to the R1 for the year. And it would just be like this, right? It's very straightforward. I guess you could do like this and the R would still be okay, right? You can use both of these high volume areas. And remember, wait for there to be extension before you start playing in these zones, at least on the hourly time frame, because you're looking for a daily pivot. Something like that is very reasonable. And I think you would get hourly extension because that would be, if you were to fall straight down from there, I think the hourly would be extended. Actually, it's not. The RSI, actually, okay, yeah, it would be. It would be extended. So something like this, I think is pretty reasonable for NVDA. I don't know that I would do it, honestly. Like, actually, it's okay. I think I would probably just try to refine an entry and zoom in, like play like the lower time frames, just to keep my risk a little bit lower than 5.24%. But again, I only see you guys once a week. So bigger picture, this is reasonable. If you're gonna look to play off of these levels, again, wait for that hourly RSI to get extended, just so that you have a little bit more edge, right? Like the odds of you seeing like some bounce in these trade zones are always increased if you have more extension, because extension is, it's basically sellers kind of getting over their skis, right? I mean, extension is both ways, but in this situation, if you have extension into this, obviously I'm pointing at it, but you can't see it. Um, yeah, extension into these key demand zones, obviously that would be, it would increase the probability that we would see some bounce out of it. Okay, and then whether or not the bounce follows through, we never know. But if we do see some bounce, then we can get our risk off and then, see what the market will give us. All right, so that's pretty much it for NVDA. Still a super healthy chart. This thing can come all the way back down to 97 bucks, which is like 30% more, 30% decline roughly, and still be structurally fine, right, on the weekly time frame, as long as they're holding over this area of balance. So that's really it. That's really it. All right, Bitcoin. So Bitcoins, we're still in this position from here. I don't love it, right? I don't love that we failed to come, tag the all-time high. We were watching these two 4-hour structures, and now we're starting to break below this key local demand. So the sellers now should be trying to come down here, looking for a back test of the value area high of this key structure from 2021, which is sitting at the all-time high, right? So that's this guy sitting at all-time high over here. As long as we're holding over it, it's a good look for buyers. And, all these defenses of the point of control, certainly a good look. Break with no follow through, break with no follow through, break with no follow through, break to fail to come down to the value area low, break with no follow through. This is where we put on the trade, our most recent trade in Bitcoin. And our stop is just under here for the remaining position. I think if it takes out our stop, that's fine. I'm just gonna stop out of it again. And then we'll look for a place like down here. Ideally, we'll see a break of this area with no follow through. And by follow through, I mean, as long as they don't come back down here under 53,000 and then they don't negate this move, then I'm still open to making those balance style plays, even though technically this wasn't really a responsive balance play. This was more of a play of looking to, get that higher low off of the back test of this point of control. Okay, so that's pretty much it. We'll just sit tight and see if we get stopped out of this guy. The daily chart's now bearish, lower highs and lower lows. Key lower high resistance is 70187.53. Okay, so Ethereum, we gave you this trade zone back here, and it's set up over here. Got the target. We gave you this trade zone last week. It just barely missed touching down at the daily no change level 3356.31. That's a very notable failure as of right now. But if these buyers can't get back over 3598.66, they don't really prove much, right? Now this structure is this guy. If as long as we're staying over this guy, we should expect price action like this. And so, ideally we'll find more acceptance over 3598.66 to again open up all of this price action and have a go at the all-time high structure, which is sitting up top, sitting a little bit higher in the mid fours. So I still think this is reasonable, although you're not going to have daily extension anymore because we've traded sideways for a bit. So if anything, I would just draw this down a little bit. Hang on a second. Like something like this, I think would be more reasonable. Look for a first exit here. All right, maybe we'll look for a potential break with no follow through even of this structure. Something like this, I think is pretty reasonable. All right. But bigger picture, we're really just trading sideways on the weekly time frame. Just a bit of, that's weird. Just a bit of an EQ, right? Or potentially EQ at least. Space for a higher low over 2814.12, and so this trade zone is essentially for a potential weekly higher low, and again, we only want to be looking for it in daily oversold conditions. All right. So that's really it for Ethereum. Yeah, anything over, I don't really care about this rinky-dink one. I would say anything over 2814.2 is going to be good for a weekly higher low. All right. CCJ. All right. So CCJ, did we do a trade zone? I think we did. Okay. So just came into it, dipped into it. It didn't really have the extension, so I wouldn't fault you if you didn't play it there. I did play it by selling a CSP, cash accrued puts. Again, if you want to, trade alongside a bunch of folks, Red Devil is our resident uranium fella, and he covers the space very frequently. Is it in this one? No. Oh, it must have been more recent. Here we go. So we just sold. I sold CSPs. I don't know what Red did, if he did anything else, but let's see. So on this day, I said I sold 719.48 Ps as well because I was talking about, all right, listen, this is the key level, right? We're always watching these major point of controls. That's why the trade zone was designed as such. And so that's how I decided to trade it. I sold 48 puts because 48 is, where all of these lows are, roughly, right? Where, it's just it was a major low back here of this structure, I believe. Yeah, so it was like roughly these highs, roughly the low of this structure, made this major high over here, roughly the lows of this all-time high structure. And so that was it. That's really it. Not much more to it than that. I still like this trade zone. I think it makes a lot of sense. I would prefer it, again, if you're going to swing trade using the zones, ideally, like at least the hourly was oversold, gets oversold, and it was oversold there. But I also recognize that you're just looking for a daily lower high, which was now set, and there is space for a higher low. We're 50.16, this low over here, but it's a pretty choppy mover. Like once it gets going well, but it balances a lot and chops around. So I would not be surprised if we were to come and test this guy for 4.47, the high of it at 44.47. And as long as we're holding over that fella without much follow through, I think it's, the trade zone is still reasonable. If you don't have any position right now, I would suggest lowering a little bit. So let me just like this, I think is, well, let me what? Okay, well, we'll just go with it. So something like this, I think, is reasonable, right? Like that, perhaps. Hang on. Yeah, something like this is pretty reasonable. We can probably even drop it down to this high volume area, that, and then try to get back here. And let me just make sure that the daily would just start flirting with getting extended. Something like this, I think, is pretty reasonable. Okay, doke. And we are just looking for a weekly higher low. Anything over 45.10 will be good for one. And so that's pretty much it. I thought the dog disappeared. She's like perfectly behind me. I didn't think she could get that small. Anyway, so that's pretty much it. All right, so moving on to 10 here. So 10 also dipped its toes. Did it come into the trade zone? 45.22. It came, just right onto it. So again, I wouldn't fault you if you didn't take any position yet there because I don't think things were that extended. Let me check on the hourly time frame. Actually, it was. So again, this is exactly what I'm talking about, right? When you have confluence with the RSI extension, at least on the hourly, because we're looking for potential daily pivot, with the trade zones that we offer you, because again, these are all designed around key structures, that is really where the most edge is. Is it going to work every time? No. Is it going to work most of the time? Yes. Right. And so, it just becomes a matter of managing your risk after that. Right. So if you did initiate in here in these hourly oversold conditions, you should have chopped it up no later than here because that was our initial target. Your stop should be under here. Right. And if you stop out, you walk away with a small win, no problem. And then we'll look for a reload pretty much here again. Right. Like if they lower low, under 5.22, it's right back to this same exact trade zone, right? Because all of this price action so far dictated by this little bit of supply, which they still haven't found acceptance above, and then this big guy over here. Okay, so that is really it. And again, that's potentially for a weekly higher low. Anything over 401.92 will be good for one, but much stronger assets out there right now. Like honestly, no one's really talking about solar, so yeah, I still think it's reasonable though. I would be fine with taking that trade zone, and obviously you already have cushion from this one. And if you're holding a runner from this one, I'd probably just stop out of that if we lose this low and then try to reset down here. Okay. And then finally, MSOs. I'm probably gonna stop covering MSOs for a little bit, especially if we start covering GME more regularly because it just doesn't look good to me. Like as long as you're holding over this guy and not coming down here, then we can expect balance like this. But these were notable failures, inability to stay over this guy, right? Because this guy is our gatekeeper into all of this, So rejection, pop and drop, pop and drop, pop and drop. There's no reason why we can't just see more price action like this now. So I still think it's a reasonable trade zone. The daily is already extended, and so I think it's reasonable to be looking for balance plays off of this demand zone, but I'm personally not too interested in it. You know, it just looks bad, right? We had a monthly higher low, higher high, no fall through straight into a lower low. Weekly time frame is bearish, lower high and lower low, tons of space for a lower high under 10.50. So even if you do get this bounce play here, like this can bounce all the way back up to here, 20% to this prior low at 8.32 and still not negate the change of this breakdown. So it's a very, very weak looking chart. You know, I don't know. I'm not too interested in trading this sector right now. So anyway, that's it. That's all we got for you this week. And so appreciate you tuning in. Thank you for sharing some of your time and energy with me. If you wouldn't mind hitting us with a like and a subscribe, that would help us out a lot. You know, an offering to the algorithm gods. If you're interested in the swing report, we will provide, which includes 2 novel ideas every week. Any idea that I trade, I will update play by play. Even if I don't trade the idea, I will still update the ideas in case people are trading them. Dan will do the same thing as well. Weekly videos from Dan, weekly videos from me. There's educational content as well available, instructional videos, so you can learn this process if you like. And that is pretty much it. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I hope to see you next week. Farewell.